So the old beard here has been the hot topic on the channel here recently. And so here's what I'm going to do. This is just a classic YouTube trick. If we hit 1,000 subs on the Sound Shed, which is the brand new channel that we just kicked off, by, let's just say Friday, this next Friday, because we're going to be leaving for Arizona for Christmas break. Yeah, if we can hit 1,000 subs before I leave for break, then I'll shave this bad boy before I leave. Clean shave. Sarah's going to hate that, but you guys win 1,000 subs in a week on the Sound Shed. Snip, snip, and you guys will be able to watch. So there's that. Okay, so let me see if I can do this. Yeah, this guy right here, this is the Z40 integrated tube amplifier from LTA. And skipping the spec sheet for now, as I'll be spending a lot more time with this guy in the near future, I'm just going to say this. One of the things that makes this amplifier pretty dang unique is that when you pick it up, seeing just how light it is, you might be asking yourself, well, where the heck is the rest of the amplifier? It's probably the only amp in New Record Day history that I might, good old noodle arms over here, might be able to bench press, probably with George's help. So look, OTL or output transformerless amplifiers are nothing new, but when it comes to when the transformers are being pulled out from the amplifier, besides trimming off a ton of weight, some interesting things can and do happen. Whether it's Ralph's designs at Atmosphere or David's designs at LTA, or heck, any other brand that uses these concepts, it does indeed sound different. But better? Well, now we have traveled into the subjective world of audiophile opinions, and for this quick video, I'm going to do my best to give you my take and possibly ruffle a few feathers while I do it. So like I said, whether it's Atmosphere or LTA, in both cases, and getting straight to the point, I think that it's fair to say that both would like for you to believe that output transformers are in the way. That's right. And being more specific, they're in the way of the music. That the transformer itself, has a voice, or perhaps alters the native voice of the tubes inside the amplifier. Now, as I hear this, as I read this, and I try to understand it, let's just say on paper, that it does seem to make sense to my caveman brain. I mean, the closer that we get to the truth in music, and if that's inside the tubes, then the better off we are. And that we should just go along and believe this concept is the way to go, right? You guys have been with me for so many years, and you know when the sarcasm starts to creep in. I can't even hide it anymore, so what's the point? Here is where my heart is in this video. I've spent the last week listening to the LTA Z40 and the Rogue Audio Cronus when it showed up, the Rogue Audio Cronus 3, and I thought, why the heck not? I mean, comparing these two amps from just a sonic performance alone was interesting, and in the end, letting the cat out of the bag now, what didn't happen, or what my ears didn't discover, is this: that across the board, in every single category, with every single speaker that I've tried, that the LTA just mopped the floor with the Rogue. The truth is, in some areas, I do think that it sounds a little better, but in others, I preferred what the Rogue was bringing to the party. So, the can of worms has been opened, and into the rabbit hole we go. Soundstage. As I have said countless times on this channel, for me is the advent, or the highest of highs when it comes to all things hi-fi. It is soundstage. And yes, even when it's fake, I want and I need to hear the performance in the room. Granted, this comes from the recording first, and there is no way that I know of or have ever experienced in any amplifier, speaker, or whatever magic potion you happen to be drinking will take a crappy recording and do any of these things that I'm rambling about. That truly, great staging starts in the studio, and that's that. Now, it's also been my experience that some amps can take those magical performances and help them cross the finish line. And in the case of both of these amplifiers that we're chatting about today, do seem to add that extra little something. And man, there are times when it can be downright magical. Now with the LTA, if we're talking about depth and width, I do think it's slightly better than the Cronus. When I say slightly better, I mean it. I had to go back a number of times to verify if this was even worth mentioning, but in the end, I did detect a more is more with the Z40. Where things get insanely tricky, and the reason this video isn't going to be cut and dry, is even with that depth and that width, I did that backwards, even with that depth and that width, what was inside the stage seemed to sound a little more dense with the Cronus. Dense is a strange word, and I'm going to try to unpack it a little bit here. Listening to something up high, let's just say in the upper mid-range, like the top end of female vocals, top end of acoustic guitars, and some fundamentals in cymbals, everything that I just mentioned seems to pop more with the Rogue. That when switching back to the LTA, those things that just had a little bit more spark seem to be a little bit thinner than with the Cronus. Even when listening to cymbals, they sounded a little bit less bell-like, almost like somebody shaved a little of the cymbal off for this new recording. Now, I want to be clear here with my words. I am at no point going to say, or am I saying, or am I even suggesting that the LTA sounded thin. I'm not saying that at all, but being honest and reminding myself that I don't work for the manufacturers, I work for you, I am going to say this. The LTA does sound a little thinner than the Cronus to me. Now, when making these comparisons, it's entirely possible that these kinds of differences might have nothing to do with one amp being OTL, and I'm not smart enough to go down that road. I realize it's entirely possible that this difference could be attributed to power being supplied to the speaker or other things that aren't even tied to transformers in the first place. But I heard these key differences, and it was interesting to realize that even in the realm of soundstage, there wasn't even one winner in this category. That both amps did better than each other in subcategories of staging, which, to be honest with you, I didn't see that coming. Now, as I moved into mid-band and I got a chance to check out some vocal content, I do think the Rogue sounds a little bit more exciting across the board and a tad bit more forward. Now again, being careful with my words, I think the LTA can sound quite deep when fed the right performance, and maybe deeper than most amplifiers that I've recently heard. The Cronus can also sound deep, but not quite as deep as the LTA. So let's get that part right. When checking out one of my favorites, Hiroshima from Blake Mills' album, Break Mirrors, it seems to me that his vocals were just a little bit more in the middle with the Cronus and slightly further back with the LTA. So these are minor differences in depth, but both sounded pretty dang deep. From a tone perspective, I felt like the Cronus offered a little bit more weight and body, where the LTA seemed to emphasize the micro details in his voice. Now, in both cases, I got all the clarity that I'm looking for, but I'm going to say this, that perhaps the clarity in the recording seemed to be more emphasized with the Z40. With the Cronus, the opposite was true. That again, it seemed to extract a little bit more weight in the vocals and giving a little bit more dynamic impact when he sang louder. Now, when it came to mid-bass and bass, I noticed a greater sense of texture and tone with the LTA, but more oomph and bravado with the Cronus. As if I sound like a broken record, this was almost deja vu to the other sonic trails that we just trekked. That again, with the Z40, there was a slight tilt in prioritizing the nuggets of information that were hiding in the shadows, where the Cronus seemed more interested in punching you in the gut and throwing tissues at you when you started to complain about it. Now, as we get to the bottom of the barrel bass, the Cronus does hit way harder and with more authority at louder listening levels. That is a fact. Knowing we're chatting about massive differences in power ratings, this did not and still doesn't surprise me or shock me. So yeah, those things matter when it comes to speaker sensitivity, and yes, system synergy is definitely a thing to consider when putting a rig together. So yeah, a short video to the point, and my goal here is this. If what I just heard and constantly heard is the actual difference between these amps being the result of yanking out an output transformer out of the Z40, of course, well then only you can decide if that somehow makes it better. As you can tell from the back and forth commentary, I don't think it's so simple, and I think that it's just going to come down to what the heck you want and what you're looking for. As for me, I dig both of these amps and both have my respect, but in the same breath, I'll throw my hat in the ring and I'm going to make it clear. I don't think for even a second that one is better than the other, just different. And with that, I'll see you fine folks in the next video.